Friends, our passage today is often referred to as the story of doubting Thomas. And in the background, I've got the image of the Drumore pulpit and the organ for those who are not familiar with the Drumore Church. According to John's narrative, on the evening of the first day of the resurrection, the risen Christ meets the disciples in the upper room where they are behind closed doors, and all the disciples are there except Thomas. They tell Thomas, and Thomas refuses to believe, not until he has been able to place his fingers and his hands into the wounds of Christ. And so in the passage today from John 20, a week later, Thomas encounters the risen Christ, who tells him, "Put your finger here. Look, here are my hands. Give me your hand. Put it in my side. Doubt no longer, but believe." Now, in preparing for today, I thought that I might explore briefly the theme of doubt. And so I looked up some quotes on doubt. It was really quite interesting to see the diversity of opinions on this theme of doubt. Some quotes spoke of doubt in a negative way. For example, Brian Tracy writes that fear and self-doubt have always been the greatest enemies of human potential. Fear and self-doubt have always been the greatest enemies of human potential. There's a lot of truth in that quote. I can see it being played out in my own life. If I'm honest, I've grown up sometimes or often with a chronic sense of self-doubt and a lack of self-confidence. It can be quite disabling, having an idea to do something, but not having the confidence to go ahead and do it, backing out before one has even embarked on the first step. One of my challenges in life has been and continues to be wrestling with a sense of self-doubt. Another quote on doubt seems to support this view of Brian Tracy. Honoré de Balzac states that when you doubt your power, you give power to your doubt. Or how about this anonymous quotation? Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. And then there's this one by Bill Plotkin. Remember that self-doubt is as self-centered as self-inflation. Remember that self-doubt is as self-centered as self-inflation. He goes on to say, your obligation is to reach as deeply as you can and offer your unique and authentic gifts as bravely and as beautifully as you can. That's quite an insight. Is it possible that self-doubt is just another form of self-centeredness? I never really thought about it from that perspective before. And so from one perspective, doubts are something which need to be conquered and overcome according to many. Helen Keller, for example, wrote, "Doubts and mistrust are the mere panic of a timid imagination, which the steadfast heart will conquer and the large mind will transcend." Now, from a religious perspective, doubt has most often been frowned upon and even been used as a stick to keep church members in line. If you doubt certain aspects of the faith, then you are no longer a true believer. And for many Christian religious traditions, this often means that your salvation is at stake. But scrolling through all the internet quotes online, there were surprisingly many quotes also that spoke of doubt in a positive light. And so, for example, Voltaire, the French philosopher, said, "Doubt is uncomfortable, but certainty is ridiculous." I've often admired people who seem to live with a confidence and a certainty that makes them look like they cannot be swayed from their goals in life. I've admired it because I know for myself the discomfort that comes from doubt. And yet, even while admiring people who have a seemingly unshakable self-confidence, there's also often a question within me, wondering how solid the foundation of that confidence really is. Sometimes, as much as I would love to live in a world where issues are more clearly black and white, giving some confidence, I'm reminded from my own experience that life is in fact far more nuanced. Is it possible that certainty, as Voltaire suggests, might actually be ridiculous? Is it also possible that on some occasions, too much certainty might actually be dangerous? Putin's invasion of Ukraine was predicated on an unshakable sense of him being right, that this was, according to Putin, the right thing to do. Is it possible that if Putin had exercised a healthy sense of self-doubt, the invasion of Ukraine might never have happened? Is self-doubt possibly sometimes a good thing? And so there are a number of people who suggest that doubt is not always a bad thing. Under some circumstances, doubt can clearly be a positive thing. René Descartes, also a French philosopher, is quoted as saying that doubt is the origin of wisdom. Doubt is the origin of wisdom. And there's real truth in this statement. For as Richard Feynman says, there is no learning without having to pose a question. And a question requires doubt. Doubt is therefore essential to learning and growing. If the reformer Martin Luther had never doubted some of the teachings that he had received from the Roman Catholic Church, there would never have been a Reformation. Doubt is also an essential element in all scientific inquiry. No progress would ever have been made in any scientific field without doubt raising questions that then needed investigation. And so without a certain amount of healthy doubt, the world would be living under the shadow of a lot more superstition than it currently does. Perhaps doubt can sometimes indeed be beneficial. Which brings us to religious doubt. As I've said, most religious organizations actively discourage doubt. Doubt is seen as the enemy of faith. I've heard many stories over the years of adults who have given up their religious faith because as children they were frowned upon for raising sincere questions and doubts, perhaps in their Sunday school or in their confirmation classes. The problem is that when religious doubts are not given space to be expressed, then people end up being encouraged to adopt a blind faith. Blind, unquestioning faith will never lead to a mature and a personal first-hand faith. At most, it will be a second-hand faith that is held on to either out of some kind of obligation or often out of fear. Any organization that has to keep people faithful by discouraging doubt and by discouraging sincere questions is behaving very much more as a cult would do. And the truth is that there are many very large and well-respected denominations who operate on this basis. For me, this is perhaps one of the gifts of the NSPCI. The non-subscribing Presbyterians of Ireland have, for the last few hundred years, given space for their members and ministers to have doubts without excluding them from the family of Christ. If the NSPCI had a patron saint, I think Thomas might have made a very good patron saint for the NSPCI. The character of Thomas in the gospel story today represents the doubters in all of us. He represents us. He represents our desire to have a faith that is meaningful, a faith that we hold on to, not because we have been told to do so blindly, but rather a faith that allows us to question and to wrestle and to come to our own conclusions, and thereby to have a faith that is not just a second-hand or hand-me-down faith, but a faith that each of us can own for ourselves, one that makes sense according to our own understandings. Now, there can indeed be downsides to doubting everything all the time, but doubt is not always a bad thing. Sometimes our doubts can even be a gift. I'd like to end with two quotes from Peter Enns. He's a biblical scholar, and these quotes are from his book entitled The Sin of Certainty. Firstly, Peter Enns believes that doubts need to be embraced. He says, "Doubt is God's instrument. It will arrive in God's time and will come from unexpected places, places out of your control. And when it does, resist the fight or flight impulse. Pass through it patiently, honestly, and courageously, for however long it takes. True transformation takes time." And then the second quote, he says, "The life of Christian faith is more than agreeing to a set of beliefs about Christ or morality or how to read the Bible. It means being so intimately connected to Christ," he says, "that his crucifixion is ours, his death is our death, and his life is our life, which is hardly something we can grasp with our minds," he says. "It has to be experienced. It is an experience. And ultimately, I would add, it is the experience of love." I wonder if that is what it means to put one's fingers in the wounds of Christ's hands and to put our hand in his side. May God bless you as you think and contemplate on these things. Amen.